I was thinking about that, literally just having this conversation before you came in, about how like overwhelming social media is. Just like you're looking through, someone's doing like a dance and they're, talking about their child, and then you're seeing a dead baby, and then you're seeing, like a meme. And it has completely shifted like how we conceptualize reality. I was thinking about it because I think your last tour was called like Let's Be Together Offline.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I don't even know how to function offline anymore. And I feel like it's definitely affecting all of us in that way. Like, how do you do it? I know that you have, obviously this whole medium that you can connect with people offline with.
Yeah.
But it feels so overwhelming the way that we are in a position where we basically, in order to see this, in order to be present with it, we have to be online to do it.
Do you think that you have to be online in order to experience or to engage? Do you believe that? Is that the premise by which you're moving from?
Intuitively, I know that we don't. I know community is primarily, for me, offline. But I feel like with everything that's happening in the world, in order to like get the information that I really want to have, the only mode of connection to people that I have is online. Like, I don't have another way of talking to my friends in Gaza. I don't have another way of, seeing the type of real media that I want to see, or, connecting to a lot of the people that I want to connect to. And I'm 41 years old. Like, I feel like I obviously know how to have, social interaction without the mode of the internet.
Yeah.
But it feels so like foreign now in a way. And maybe you're like, okay, you're crazy.
No, I wouldn't say crazy. I just think that we're in a time where it's fascinating that has become the mode of how we believe we must communicate.
Yeah.
I think that there's an illusion that that's the only way to get information. I mean, there's a difference between like social media and needing to use other forms of communication. Yeah. I met a lot of friends that use Signal and WhatsApp and all sorts of other communication devices or avenues. I don't know. I just feel like when you have too much connection, something becomes disconnected, And so when we first went to Palestine, that was in 2015. And there was a very strategic ask and order to us to share what we saw.
Yeah.
And at that time, Palestinians weren't for all intents and purposes, we weren't seeing Palestinians telling their own stories on media in the ways that they need to, and that they should be. And we thought, okay, if we get the stories out, then this would change the conditions of what is happening. Surely, if people heard and knew the horror of what is taking place, then any decent feeling, sentient being would recognize that this needs to stop, that it needs to come to an end, and that we must do everything in our power to do that.
You would think.
Social movements and people, we struggle with ideas, we struggle with the conditions in our reality, and we learn from those struggles. Mm-hmm. So we must make efforts towards the things that we think are best in the time that we are doing the work we're doing.
Yeah.
And yet we always have the time, if we get to live long enough, if we get to be in community with each other long enough, we're afforded the privilege to look back, to reflect, and to assess what was effective, what was ineffective, and what else needs to be done. What more can we think through? What more should we be feeling through? What more? And what else? Not even just what more, but what else? We had to learn from the past what it offers us to be in conversation, to go on delegations. Black people have been trying to effectively create solidarity and tell the stories of our oppressed brothers and sisters across the globe to our community, so that we could recognize that this is a global issue, and that what we're fighting is much larger than just what's within our quote unquote borders. And yet there's something to be said for the fact that here we are, what is it? This is 2015 that this happened. It is now 2025, 10 years later. We would have probably never thought that this is the reality that we would be facing.
Yeah.
And yet, more people than ever know about what's happening. It's on a far more larger platform. Many, many people have been speaking out. And people have been putting their bodies on the line, trying to get an end to the genocide.
Yeah.
And they aren't folding, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think that we should be turning away to the reality of what our people are facing. And yet we have to assess what is effective for us to be able to make the changes we want to see.
As much as I know that the roots of movement have come in interpersonal interaction and actually, and I'm assuming for you as well, is like going and seeing and being there, like especially for Palestine, like being in Palestine. First time that I walked onto my, like ancestral homeland in Palestine, I felt different. I felt different about the movement. I felt different about myself. I felt different about everything.
Surely.
But also everything that's happening today with Gaza, the majority of it is happening because people are watching it on social media. So there's some, I mean, I know it's a tool, but it's been so like integral in this opening.
I want to expand the conversation.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Because I think for me, where we are is not because of social media. It's because of years and years of grassroots organizing that took place in real time with real people behind closed doors and real conversations and sitting over, Makluba and sitting in corners talking about, our issues, our struggles, and thinking about ideas together. It took a lot more than this moment. So what we're seeing is just, it's the tip of the iceberg at this point. What people are facing and the brutality and the grotesqueness of it and the horror of it is what everyone's fascinated by.
Yes.
I think because everybody loves a car crash as much as we deny that. There's some sick
like
fetish with
trauma porn,
suffering. Yeah. It's much harder and it's much less interesting for people or less sexy for people to recognize that what actually got us to this moment was real relationships and compassionate feeling solidarity that was rooted in an embodied way of being in the world. I mean, the first time I heard about Palestine was through a poet named Tahani Salah. And she was a Brooklynite for all intents and purposes, but one of the rawest poets I knew. And we were in community with each other. And our entry point to our struggles and our realities and our lives were about our love for this art form and our love for what this art form could teach us about language and how it could help us rearrange and reshape the conditions of our reality. So, I fell in love with her language and her work, and then I fell in love with the stories she was telling, and the longing that she had for her community and for her people didn't feel so foreign.
Yeah.
It didn't feel so unreal to me, and I think I'm weary of people that it takes, brutality for your compassion to set in. That is more scary to me than anything.
Yeah.
If you have to see me bleeding and begging and weeping and whining for your heart to be moved, that's something is, I don't know what that is. That is foreign. That's foreign to me. So in light of what is happening and what is taking place, I think I'm not going to deny that going to Palestine wasn't life-changing. Of course, getting out of Brooklyn was life-changing for me. Yeah. So I think getting to the point where I could recognize that poems were an entry point for me to understand and to connect and to relate to the world, by way of that, to find community, and in that community, to recognize care and actions that could be mobilized based off of that care, and people being able to be more involved and more engaged in their lives because they were able to process whatever it is that they were going through in the work that they were sharing. I think that leading me to a place where now I'm in conversation with organizers and
Yeah.
people who believe in the role that culture can play to help us shift policies and ideas about how we got to be here together, and what else is there to how we govern and how we think through
Yeah.
our differences. I think that was probably, that is my story. That's the story that I know. And I am grateful that we're seeing more actions of solidarity towards the Palestinian cause. And by virtue of that, every cause, people have access to a lot of information. And it's wonderful that social media is allowing us to learn and to be more intrigued and to ask more questions and to share our causes. But we haven't been trained on how to ingest this information. There are no schools, no programs that are helping. I mean, if they exist, they are not democratized. They aren't socialized among, early education, childhood education. But we're in a different time.
Yeah.
Which means we have to have different tools and be given different resources to deal with what is new, what is fairly new. Social media is still very new.
Very. So
the fact that there aren't programs to help young people understand how to decipher reality from not reality.
Yeah.
There's all these studies and there's films that were made about children that, got caught up on dark elements of the internet and ended up doing horrible actions, et cetera. So there's still a lot for us to know and learn about the psychological, emotional impact of what social media is doing to us as a people.
Yes.
So that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But it's connected because with that as a resource and with that support, I think we can make better assessments of what are the limitations of social media, and then what are the uses, what can we learn, and what can we gain from it. And I don't think we have been, at least within the social and within social movements, I don't think we have been as intentional about assessing what is effective and what is ineffective about our uses of social media.
Yeah.
And I got to be a part of a great organization, the Dream Defenders. We helped to organize delegations, but we also took breaks from social media.
That's amazing.
Most of our social movements at this time were galvanized around hashtags and, murder victims' names being spread across and streamed on platforms. And while that it's powerful for us to remember the names of the people who have been harmed, there's sort of this hollowing out of, the full expression and humanity of our people when we just use them as
trends.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah. I mean,
I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with how do you talk about this because, what does a cemetery look like in a tweet,
Wow. Yeah.
What is what grave site is there in an Instagram post?
Yeah.
How do you pay homage? How do you go back to that person and lay flowers down and speak to them and ask what there is to learn from what they want you to do? There's a different process for some of us who have different beliefs towards whatever you want to call spirituality or the other realm. And I don't know, sometimes there's people doing work. These days everybody's doing something. So maybe there's some digital death doula work that's happening.
Probably at this point.
But I think that needs to be developed. I think that there needs to be something that we can do about the trauma, the collective trauma that is that we're all engaging with, because to be honest, I don't need to see it to know it that it's still impacting me. I don't need to see babies being murdered to know that if someone is murdering anywhere, that it's going to ripple in some sort of way back. That's just the law of physics. It's the law of spiritual truth. There are some laws that can't be written in paper and pen, they just are.
Yeah.
So I think whether people want to acknowledge the death toll and its impact it exists and it's going to impact. It's coming up on our shores as we speak. So yeah, I think that there are certain people that need the images. I don't know if those are our people,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who I don't know. There's a lot I don't know.
I guess I think it's 77 years later. I think we're all just trying to figure out what's going to wake everyone up. And that's what has been like.
Well, people are waking up.
And 76 years later, we are also shocked for people to have to see carnage to get out in the streets.
Yeah. Or imagine 400 years of slavery.
Yes. Oh no, 100%. And with everyone turning a blind eye to it.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
Yes.
You don't have to even imagine. I mean, look at the Congo.
Yeah.
Look at Sudan, So there is an aversion to Black people specifically being
100%.
brutalized and murdered and assaulted. So I don't know that this is unique.
Definitely not. It's not.
To any of us. I think that there is something that we must assess about, what the brutality, what seeing the brutality does for us, and why are there certain people we can afford to see in pain and suffering, and others who we just say, oh, that's just atrocious.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
It's just like a white woman crying?
Yes.
No,
Oh my
how
God.
dare, what's wrong?
Yes.
And so I think, where does your compassion begin and end is a huge question for us all to have to face and contend with, because it shouldn't take having to see, people suffering to ungodly extents for your heart to be moved in the direction of decency and, affirming
humanity.
Yeah, humanity, the right to exist, the right
Yep.
to be, to breathe, to live, to love,
Yeah.
to nurture the ones you love. We are at a place at this time in the world where it's like, how have we advanced so much technologically? Y'all are trying to create imitations of people, and you still can't take care of the ones we have now here.
Yeah. No, it's so
You refuse
interesting.
to. It's not that you can't. You refuse to believe that everyone is worthy,
Yeah.
and that we live in a place of abundance, that we were given everything that we need to take care of each other. Somehow we don't have enough.
Yeah.
And that to me is the greatest illusion. It's just it's a complete lack of political imagination, complete lack of, moral inclination in any way. And for the most part, it's like, it's just evil,
It is. It is. No, it is 100%.
I don't know how else you defend or explain it, but
And you can't.
these are revealing times.
It's been revealing in so many different ways. I think also in a way that people are coming to see people in new lights, like friends of theirs, celebrities, people that they looked up to. And I think kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is because I feel like there are people out there that so many people have reverence for, and they don't really know them. And it kind of speaks to this idea of connecting offline. Like, I know so many people love you for different reasons, for your poetry, for your advocacy, for your thoughts on Palestine, your movement work. And I'm not saying that they are going to get to know you on this podcast, but I just feel like for me, there were people that I really respected through movement work, through activism. And I realized I didn't really know anything about them beyond that. And I wanted, my curiosity was to get to know people who I think are doing beautiful things. So I was,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on.
And I knew your brother before.
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing this work for long enough to know that anytime, like I said, we knew we wanted a time like this to come, but we didn't know what it would look like.
100%.
But anytime you would meet somebody that was an advocate or unafraid and unapologetic to talk about Palestine, it was like, you really found your people.
Yes.
You're like, oh, you get it. Okay, you see how fucked up this shit is.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a metric of how one moves in the world in a way, in a certain kind of way when it comes to movement.
Yes.
Because there was always this conversation of, oh, well, they're progressive except Palestine.
Yes.
You know, so it's been eye-opening for me too, because whether it didn't matter what somebody's identity was, when you found out, oh, they know what's going on and they're not afraid to talk about it, you're like, oh, my people. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I felt like that.
Oh, I love that you felt that with my brother.
Yeah.
I feel like
because I've met Palestinians that will not talk about what's going on.
100%.
So.
And in a lot of ways, understandably. And, you know, thankfully, like my family we stand on our privilege in that we've like run in circles that aren't necessarily indicative of all of these other things that we are. You know, we are Palestinian, and, you know, my brother and my sisters are half Dutch. I'm half Irish. Like, we have all these kind of other things, but we also have a ton of privilege. And so to say we're Palestinian in those rooms was very different. And so you had to kind of be able to go either, you know, I'm going to sit here and be quiet, or I'm going to actually speak out. And so I think that was kind of we separated ourselves in that way. And we found a lot of people along the way that we were like, you know, thank you for seeing us, because we see you as well. So,
yeah.
But I guess my real first question is, who is Aja Monet? How do you define yourself to yourself? Because I think that there's a lot of people defining us as people.
I don't want to sound too kooky, but I think I'm figuring that out every day, you know?
100%.
I feel like for the most part, the one thing I know for sure is that I'm a poet, and that's the way that I see the world and that I move through the world. That's what makes sense to me, is when I'm among other poets, I feel like, oh, okay, I get y'all.
Yeah.
And you get me, and we make sense to each other. So that has been my community from the first moment I found them, you know, as a teenager. A composition of all the people who've poured into me, you know, and all the people that I've come across and gotten to love and be loved by.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm grateful to have breath and exist as the person in this body at this time, the granddaughter of a union worker. And, you know, my family is I'm still trying to figure out how to write about my family.
Yeah.
Has been through a lot, you know, a lot. My family was fled from Cuba and came to the States, part of my family. And Jamaica is like in there. And on my father's side, you know, he's Puerto Rican and Black, and don't know him that well, but I was raised really kind of on my own. I've had to figure out a lot of things. So that's why I say oftentimes I feel connected to people who have poured into me, you know, and that's family is different for me than how some people talk about it. So I've had to learn a lot about life through that experience of the world, and poet seemed to make the most sense because I didn't have to have a traditional family. I didn't have to be a traditional anything. It was all about a way of seeing. It's always been just about a way of looking and being in the world. And so I fit with that. I like it. It's vague enough and specific enough, you know?
I think it's beautiful. And it's you.
It's what works.
That's what's important. So another kooky kind of thing is behind you is that those are the seeds. So I go out of town a lot for work, and my stepdaughter and my fiance, I leave them little seeds, little things that they can look at while I'm not in town. Or
that's so sweet.
Yeah, so I made some for here. And so if you do the little gadget, like it's like a gumball machine, if you turn it, one will pop out for you.
Okay.
And that's your seed, and you can open it and read it. And I don't know which one you're going to get. It's not like, oh, is it empty?
Deep. Ooh.
Do another one.
Deep. That would be what would happen to me.
No, stop. Actually, that's really funny.
That's like
okay,
the
you
universe.
got no. The universe was saying you are open
You're
to
everything
anything.
and nothing at the same time.
What'd you get? Oh my
This
God.
is really cool.
Okay.
I want to make this in my house.
Oh my God, you should. I don't actually have the little machine. We just put it in a ball. But now that we have it here, what does it say?
Ooh, a personal or creative risk you took that changed your life.
Ooh, this one. I'm actually very excited for this one for you.
Dang.
It's a hard one.
Yeah. Because I wish sometimes I'm one of those on the spot like people, and other times I'm like, I should have spent more time with that thought.
You can think about it.
I feel like I do this so often that it's hard for me to choose one
True.
specific experience.
Give me a few if you have time. We have the time.
There's a lot of things I think I could have done for what people would call like traditional success.
Yeah.
And to be at a place now where what I do, people pay attention to or listen to, took so much, like, it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
You know, and it still like is never for sure, but it's one of those things where you're just grateful that the risks you took or the unconventional paths you may have found yourself on lead you to a place where people still value the authenticity of that path. So I would say that being a poet in and of itself is like not necessarily the thing you wanted to be when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I was sure of it. I was so sure of it no matter what. I was like, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be writing, reading poems until my very end of days. And not everyone in my family, my biological family, really understood it.
Yeah,
you know,
of
there was
course.
no path. There was no example that they could understand or connect to. I think people understood like being a rapper or a singer or something of that nature. But, you know, I had someone in my family like that I really looked up to at the time just tell me like, you think you're going to change the world with your little poems? You think your poems is going to do anything? That's not how the world works. It's money.
Yeah.
You want to do something in this world, you got to make money.
Yeah.
You know, money's what's going to change the world. And I'll never forget that. I will never forget that because that same person in my family, not that I believe that my poems will change anything much more than myself, but it got to a place where I got to read at the Women's March. And I remember that person in my family sending me a message. I hadn't talked to them in years and being like, wow, you really did it. And I'm sorry.
Oh, that makes me teary.
Yeah, it makes me teary too, you know. It really was one of those things where I just had to, when you really move from a place of love and knowing what you're meant to do, you have to kind of just give people grace for what they don't understand.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do when you are a person who just wants to be loved and you just want to love, which is, I think, most people. You have to have the strength in yourself to keep doing whatever you feel is you're meant to do, you know? And you'll only know it because God or the universe or whatever you want to call it will affirm your path in the ways that you need to be affirmed. Only you will know. But if every time you're trying to do something, only mayhem comes in your way, that's not your path.
Yeah. The Seeds is available on Watermelon Plus, the home of stories that matter. Watermelon Plus is home to award-winning cinema from Palestine and beyond, the kind of stories that you can't find anywhere else. One of my favorite hidden gems is Miles from Nowhere. It's a hilarious comedy about a Muslim Kiwi. It's funny, romantic, and I watched the whole thing in one sitting. If we want to shift culture and change the way stories are told, we need to build our own power. If you believe in what I'm doing with Watermelon Pictures, the best way to support us is to subscribe today. Preserve the past, fuel the future with Watermelon Plus. people who know what they want to do at a young age, especially if it's, unconventional. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, that's so amazing. I feel like that must have been, that's very hard to know in your heart what you want to do at a young age and have to push through convention to get there. I guess my curiosity is like, how do you get to a place where at a very young age, you want to be a poet? I wrote poetry as a kid and mine was crap.
I'm not trying to be a poet.
My poetry was not, it was cute.
But so was mine.
Yeah.
I look back and I'm like, oh my God, please nobody ever see that.
Oh my God, you should do a book of poetry of your kid poetry.
No, you don't understand. It was horrible, but I'm grateful that I went through the phase of being horrible. I think people forget that, is that you have to really put your all into something. And just like, I admire a lot of my friends who are musicians that I get to spend a lot of time with. And like, I see the way they play and they're just incredible. And I'm like trying to learn little by little a piano. It's really humbling at this age to be trying to learn something.
Totally.
And you're just like, oh my God, I suck, But you got to remember that, like, dang, girl, you good at poetry because it's now 20-something years later.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that people spent time with and had to, push the wrong notes and figure out the sounds and go through the struggle of it. And I think the only difference for me that kept me with it was that I loved poetry enough and I loved what people who did poems made me feel that I was convinced that I would do everything in my power to devote myself and be of service to that same calling, that same gift. I knew for a fact that I was going to study. I was going to work as hard as I needed to. I was going to sit at the feet of every single person that would bear to tell me a story, that would give me a time of day. I was the kind of poet that people make fun of it now, but when I was a teenager, like, I would be at every poetry event, listening to every poem, sit there early. I was broke, had no money, would be circling around the venue until they opened and, trying to wait to see if I could get a ticket to get into a place, or asking somebody to put me on a list for whatever it was, or, trying to do an open mic to get advanced to another event that you could then possibly read for someone else and do this and do that. I sat at every free event I could get to. And I think that it was more about the hunger to be good at it, really to be moved by it, that it kept me consistent. Because when you have something like that, that's a calling on your life, I think you just can't, you can't sleep without it. Yeah. Like I'm okay with this. I have a full-time job. I also have a full-time job with an incredible organization called V-Day that services women. But I want to say that if I was a bus driver, I'd be reading the people I would be driving poems. If I was a waitress, I would be making poems out of the menu. If I was, if I had any other job in my life, it doesn't go away because, my vocation is not specifically poet. Yeah. It's really an orientation that I have towards the world. So, I could have been an astronaut and I would have been a poet. You know what I mean? Talking about people wanting to go to space.
I was just going to say.
But, I would have said a lot more creative things than take up space. But, that's neither here nor there. There's just, I love all, there's so many paths I could have seen for myself that I look back now. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I would have loved to be an architect. If I would have just taken the time I did on poetry to become an architect, what would I have done? I could have been a doctor. I could have done anything, but I think poetry was the thing that kept me going through all things. So yeah, it's like a weird obsession, that you have.
That you've made into a career.
Yeah, basically. And honestly, I wouldn't even be doing this if people didn't care. Yeah. Like to the point where I'm sharing. Yes. You know what I mean? Because you could share something and it's beautiful, get it out, express it. But people started to show up and people started to communicate what it meant to them. Yeah. And then that became something else. And I was like, oh crap, this matters. Like, I knew it mattered, but now it's a whole different experience to the craft. You know, you have now you're relating, and there's like communication, and you have to be responsible for that a bit, you know, and accountable to it. And I think that becomes a different tier of it. Not to mention, you have to have people in your corner. Nobody does anything alone. And I almost gave up on poetry many times in terms of like putting the pen down, not wanting to even look at it. And it was friends of mine, Daphne, who's my manager now, who literally is one of the people that was like, no, this is the thing you're supposed to be doing. What are you doing with your life?
That's so affirming.
I was babysitting, and I was in France trying to get away from America, trying to teach babies English. I was doing all types of stuff to not do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So it's weird. Sometimes whatever you're meant to be doing will also come back for you at different phases in your life. And you're like, oh, this is inescapable now.
Oh, 100%. I heard you wrote a poem, though, when you were young that made your teacher cry. So if you...
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
I do not remember it, but I know it was called Why I Write.
Oh.
It was kind of like a list poem, but it was a poem just about the things I was going through in my life. I think a lot of times that's also the weird thing about our bodies.
Yeah.
How we are seen in the world by other people who don't know anything about what's actually going on inside, is that I think a lot of people, maybe, especially even from the time I was young with my teachers, like no one knew what I was going through. They just knew what I looked like.
Yeah.
And so I think when I actually had a voice and shared what I saw and what I was experiencing in my world, it blew my teachers' minds because they just didn't realize what I was going through. And I think that was the first time that I noticed, oh, like, y'all saw something else. And now that I spoke up, you have a whole other relationship to who I am in the world. And that expanded my ability for people to have compassion, you know, for people to extend understanding.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That's very powerful to like learn that. I don't know how old you were when that happened.
Yeah, I was probably about 15.
Yeah, that's a powerful thing to learn at 15, that your words and your ability to express them have that much power.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think you knew that then, or is that something that you know now looking back?
Now looking back, I think then I was so convicted though. You know, you have this like young person conviction, and I was very religious at the time because you don't survive things without something to anchor your belief system, your faith in yourself.
Yeah.
You know, your faith in that things will get better, that there are other things outside of your conditions that you can do to create and change the way the world works for you or works around you. And so, like, faith was a big part of it for me. I think that's one of the things I admire a lot about most resilient people, is that our relationship to something greater than ourselves grounds us and keeps us going, if you will. I mean, how many people have converted to Islam post, you know, October 7th, just based off of the sheer nature of Palestinian resistance, resilience, and like resonance of the spiritual heart, you know, for humanity. Because there's a faith that you see in people who have continued to maintain just decency and humanity and love despite all odds, despite everything that they may experience counter that. I mean, only people who know that there is something greater than just you and yourself can survive.
I'm grounded in so many different religions because my mom is Irish Catholic, or she grew up Irish Catholic. My father is Muslim. Religion wasn't big in my home.
Yeah.
But I feel like I also feel like I have a lot of faith, but my faith feels completely, you know, outside of the realm of organized religion.
Yeah.
Was there a specific faith that you had? Was it, you know?
When I was younger, it was the church.
The church,
It was the church. It was like the Pentecostal Baptist church was a huge part of my upbringing. But there was this mysticism to it. You know, I think like Black people in America have there are many denominations, but there's a certain orientation specifically with like Pentecostal and Baptist. It can become, like it's a lot for some people, speaking in tongues and all this stuff, but you have this relationship to the Holy Spirit or what, if you will, whatever that may be for different people, but you know that there is something else working through you and with you at any given moment in time. And as I developed and I got older, I thought I was going to be like a minister. I really thought when I was a young person, I was like, I'm going to bring people to the love of God, and they're going to, and I really believed, kind of to your point, that there was something true to all religions, that there had to be an interfaith. At that time when I was a kid, I didn't know about, sort of these interfaith belief systems that were existing in the world, but I knew friends who were Muslim, and I've connected to them. It said Tahani was one of my closest friends. She had the hijab. She was dope, fly, hilarious, completely like anybody else. I was like, oh, so what's your faith? And she would share her faith, and I had friends who were Jewish. And so when I went to Sarah Lawrence College, that's where I ended up going for undergrad, I was convinced I was going to study, theology so that I could learn. And it's in a hippie liberal arts school too. So I was like, I'm going to take this whole new approach to like spirituality that people just need to tap into. And of course now it's like so common. But at the time when I was growing up, it was like, I thought I was like onto something. I was like, I'm doing something different, I learned a lot more about faith and like different practices towards really just grace and presence and love. And then it became less about a religion for me. It was more about, how do I practice values that reflect God, in all things. And poetry, I think, always was my religion from the very beginning. So I think what I loved about the texts in the Quran and what I loved about, the Bible, it was really the poetry of it that I loved. That's really what I fell in love with. And then I was like, oh man, people have to know that we're doing this every day. We are the poets of the world that we are creating. And so I think that that's part of why I connect to spiritual texts, because I have reverence for the power of language and what it can do to heighten our connections to each other and our, relationship to the existing energy of forces, powers that we may not see,
I think you and I also have something in common in that we both had, as far as I can tell, had close relationships with our grandmothers. My teta, my grandmother, never could go back to Palestine after, 1948. And I think you have a similar situation with your grandmother in Cuba.
Yeah.
And I think you went back to Cuba. I also went back to Palestine. There's something about like longing for a homeland that you have, never been to. And then, and also witnessing someone long for a place, and that what that like instills in you, that like that feeling. So I'm curious how your grandmother affected you.
That's a good question. Well, my grandfather was I just found out that he was a part of the Navy, the U.S. Navy, which I actually didn't know. I knew he worked on a base in Cuba, but I didn't know he was part of the Navy. So my uncle told me that. That's how he ended up being a union worker. And my grandmother met him, after she had already had a family. And that's a long story. And one day I'm going to write a book about it. But there's a lot that I got to learn about her as I became a woman. I was closer. She's probably one of the most pivotal figures in my memory of my childhood, but she wasn't the nicest. She was a very like old school, cutthroat, tell you about you to your face type of person. And I realize as I get older, like my mother, my aunts, everybody, they have a lot of pain and trauma from that. And I guess this is why like grandparents connect to their grandchildren a little bit more, is because that removal of like time and space for you to not take it as personal as the children would.
I never really thought about it that way.
But for me, I think like once I got to have more compassion for her and I got older and I realized like, wow, this lady's just got a lot of wounds and she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know better. My grandfather died very young and left her with the kids, you know, when he passed, and he died on the job. And I think that she never made it sound like she wanted to go back to Cuba in the sense that I think it had a lot of pain and trauma for her. She really loved this country and she believed in it. And I think she believed in what my grandfather and her set out to do together here. I think there was a real belief that they were going to build that love and make a family. And he loved her in a way that I've never seen a man love a woman. I never got to meet him, but in terms of the way that they would tell stories about his love for her.
Yeah.
And I think for her, she was just following wherever love was, you know, and it just brought her here. And so she didn't really miss out on going back to Cuba until I had to confront her about some stuff that came up once I went to Cuba for a grassroots poetry festival. And I went and I talked to her before going. That's when we started getting close, really close.
Yeah.
Because I think she realized that I was about to go and find out some stuff. Because she's a little witch, so she knew, you know, she knows stuff. People would come to her for things. So it was like, she's a santera. And so I went like, okay, Grandma, I'm about to go. This is about to happen. What's going to happen when I go? I just want to know, is there family I should meet? She was trying to be a little quiet. She kind of shared some things, but she didn't share everything.
Yeah.
So I went there for this poetry festival and I was bent on trying to understand why we got to where we are, why our families is so torn apart and why we went through the things we went through. And people don't realize that war is personal and political.
Yes,
you know,
very much is.
It's deeply personal. So when any time a people go through, you know, a revolution and what it takes to have a revolution, there's so many people torn in different ways and families that are torn apart and politics that break down families. And so there's a lot that I went back and realized, and I came back and I wrote a piece and I had to confront her about some things. And I was like, oh, I said, I wrote a piece called Dear Revolution, I'm Your Granddaughter. And part of the idea was that, you know, the revolution has all this, at least in movement spaces, when I was in those conversations, it's always about like, you know, the revolution. And it's very romantic, but I think people don't realize the sacrifice that it requires and what it will take and what it does to the real material conditions of your life and your family. And people flee and people have to leave everything and do all types of things to defend themselves and to defend the ones that they love. And so I had to learn that through her, you know, and through her story and through her experience. And I ended up having a lot more compassion for her and understanding that, oh, this thing that we think may look one way, it actually looks very different than what we would imagine, you know, and you can't even predict what it will look like because it's going to affect all of us in different ways.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, especially as adults, for us to look back at the interactions that we had with family members, also to start seeing our family members as humans.
People.
Yeah.
Which is so funny because you're like, of course they're people.
Yes, of course they are. But at the time, also, you just see, you know, like mom as mom, dad as dad, or grandmother as grandmother, not as like a person who's gone through all these other lifetimes that you never got to experience before you came around. Like they don't exist within the bubble of your life.
Yeah.
And I think when I finally had that revelation, that was a big, huge changing point for me, as far as like my grandparents, even my father realizing, you know, my father was a refugee. My father lived, you know, the majority of his formative years in different countries he had never been to before he came to America, didn't speak any English. Like it gives you a context for them as humans that is interesting.
And that's why the current political climate of this country is so bizarre, because we're this is a country of people who have, had to migrate for various reasons, all sorts of reasons, and usually being destabilized because of war.
Mm-hmm.
And war that we have this nation state has been involved in perpetrating against other people. Yep. So I think that there's a lot that we think of in terms of these issues being like far and removed from us, and then not recognizing that so many people that we come across with, it doesn't even have to be your biological family, but the person that's serving you, coffee or packing up your groceries, or, the people that are taking and preparing your food. Like, everyone has a story, and everyone got to be where they are because they had to walk through their shoes in the path that they've had to make. And none of us are above any path or below any path, It would benefit a lot of us if we had a little bit more grace for all the paths that got us to be where we are, because none of us are here without someone having to love and fight and struggle for us to be here. Others provided more resource to do so,
100%.
But I think that there's a lot that people are learning and being exposed to right now. And I'm overwhelmingly more optimistic than not.
Me too, actually. I mean, even though I feel every day like the weight of the veil coming off, I feel like that as people are seeing, you're hearing and seeing more. That doesn't mean that those things didn't exist before. You're just being exposed to more and more.
Yeah, and you could still be crying and upset and frustrated and angry, and know that that's why you do what you do. That's why you continue to wake up every morning. That's why you have a heart. That's why you have passion, and you should be feeling something.
I got you something.
Ooh, really?
Yes. To thank you for being here. And also just, I saw it and it reminded me of something of you.
You got the agua florida. That's great.
There's something else in there.
Thank you.
Just some crystals. But I know that you've written a book.
Yes,
and
I did.
And
that's so beautiful.
And
Thank
I wanted
you.
to just get you something. One, to congratulate you on your book.
Thank you.
And I think are you a Virgo?
That's so funny. I am actually a Leo, but a cusp.
Oh, you're a cusp Leo. I'm a Leo.
So I'm Virgo.
Oh, you're right on the
rising.
Oh, okay.
Virgo rising, Cancer moon, and this says Cancer and Virgo. So
I kind of got it.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Thank you.
Of course,
I appreciate it.
And I know you wrote this book, and I'm really interested. I can't wait to read it. If you wanted to read from it.
Yeah, I have something that I wrote that's new, but I also I'm also down to read something from the book.
Whatever you want to read.
It was weird because I was like, I know I'm supposed to be coming to talk about the book, but then I was like, this other poem feels more connected.
Okay, so read it. Read that.
It really touches on the time that I spent organizing in Florida, which is a huge part of my origin story with Palestine as well. Although the poems aren't explicitly about Palestine in any way, but they couldn't be possible without Palestine, because I met my former partner who I ended up organizing with in Florida, in Palestine, and from Palestine moved to Florida. And then the work that I did there and became super involved with was rooted in that origin story.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny because it's like everybody's writing about things in a very literal way at this time, but I feel like the poetry of life brought me to where I am now, and a lot of that has to do with the ways we were politicized by Palestine. So I'll share with you a little bit of the intro that kind of touches on organizing and movement spaces at times can be so rigid with indoctrination and rhetoric that we are rarely invited to bring our whole visible and invisible selves into the work. Our curiosity, our fear, our insecurity, our poetry. We come to this work shaped by the culture we were raised in, and if we want to change the nature of our systems, we must examine our convictions. We must examine ourselves. No one can possibly hold you more accountable than you hold yourself. The poem can be a compassionate lens, a restorative process in good faith, a reckoning. A poem can rinse, reflect, and reveal us. I give thanks for the intimacy of cleansing poems, the living that brings a poem into being, the search for language and the acceptance of its limitations. Some of the strongest poems written will never be published. They show up in our hearts like footsteps in the sand along the shore, there and then not. Moving to Florida from New York City for love and community provided me with space to confront both personal and political, to invite all aspects of my unself as lover, poet, and cultural worker. I learned to move between identities rather interchangeably, each one deep in the other. I feel most home in the flow between this and that, there and here, them and me, him and me. I was in a relationship with a community organizer, and we used our home as a gathering space for artists, organizers, and activists. I gave it my very all. I fell in love with the land, the air, the water, us, and our people. It is difficult enough to endure loss or abuse, whether it be by the state or by the people we love most intimately, and yet to remain compassionate, soft, to seek deeper into the complexity of ourselves, to taste the salt of our sweat and tears, and to not become stone, to not become that which was done to us, to not fall in love with our anger, to be water, a body of water, to know thirst, to quench it, to prepare this bath of words, rushing with nowhere to go, the ocean calling out through you vast and everlasting, when there is a poem dripping out of the bathroom sink, oscillating from the ceiling fan in the bedroom, dew waving on leaves peering through a window, a kind of reading, when there is a hurricane of poems raging on the front yard, sneakers piled up at the screen door. I could not unsee beyond where we were, as though there is a seeing without eyes felt in following each knowing as if it is already here, to arrive before leaving. I made a home with someone, and then it was unmade. I charted forward with the whole heart of myself and left precaution to dealings with TSA agents, police officers, or IDF soldiers. I unbuttoned and unbuckled with will and want for a lover who was more than that, though he treated me as less more often than I'd like to admit. But it was beautiful and revolutionary before it wasn't, like all true loves. And we made the movement our everything. And even when we gave it our all, it was never enough. And when we wanted to rest, we fought. And when we wanted to fight, we cried. And when we wanted to cry, we laughed.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's part of
That's beautiful.
The introduction.
I'm like, sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's from Florida Water.
I feel that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to.
Thank you for writing it.
My little. Yeah, it's hard to share things, so I'm like, grateful that you let me do that, because it also frees me up to do that, to get over it.
Oh, well, it was beautiful, and I felt every single word of that, and I think that, share it more.
Thank you. Okay, the one I do want to share.
Yeah, please.
That's actually new. It's not done, but
I love that. I feel very special.
Yeah, but I felt it's important to share, and right now it's just a poem for Los Angeles. I don't have a title yet, and it was after the fires that I wrote this. So, everyone wants to be a robot. We build our prisons to be guard the prisoner. Burning bushes pop across a screen. Threads of prayers between watch duty app notifications. Evacuate Holly weird gridlocked and sparks of fear. An arsonist's wet dream. Rolling down Runyon Canyon. Weather in the mind. Santa Ana's hands shivering against the window. Shattered winds, ash on the lung. A sky of blazing breath. A flame on the distance looking back, the hue of a cough, the scent of a tickling sneeze. It has not rained. Dry as silence in the dragon's mouth, boulevards between capitalism's teeth. A neon cotton candy cloud hovers over Koreatown buildings at midnight. Hungry for water. A rusted sunset. Some say smart meters, directed energy weapons, or Edison power lines are to blame. An oligarch's impending inauguration. The mayors in Ghana for Dutty December. Neoliberal Americans in Africa on the rise. From Palisades to Palestine, an actress compares the LA oceanfront to Gaza. Never mentions the Rafah border, the cutoff of 2,000 aid trucks. Neglects to mention the body bags, rubble or the Israeli snipers aimed at children. But everyone's donating their wardrobe to people without closets. Can a millionaire be homeless? All of a sudden, we know the meaning of community. All of a sudden, the spirit of giving is in the air. The people kindle around the flame. Nothing like disaster to shock a heart into beating. The feel-good volunteers did Reiki before they dropped off outfits for people with no events to attend. Skid Row knows how to read the room less. The undocumented avoid handouts framed in the halls of fascism. To be on house arrest with no house, just arrested. Everyone's worried about clean air. HEPA can't filter this corruption. Maybe socialism is on its way. Look at us. Look at us. Look at us who took the breeze for granted. Running faucet of dreams. Mutual aid. Octavia Butler newscasting premonitions from a gravesite in Altadena. The ghosts of consequence stain the air. What's the insurance policy for chickens coming home to roost?
That's beautiful. That was amazing.
Thank
You're just
you.
going to make me cry. That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean...
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Thank you for letting me share it.
No, I really appreciate it. I feel honored to have heard that. And I felt both of those for so many different reasons. I mean, everything that's happened in LA and the way that you captured it is, thank you.
I felt like it's something, since we're here and there's no other place that I have been able to read it that would actually recognize what it means at this time. You know, you want to be sensitive to what's happening in the moment, but sometimes things come at you and it's just like, there's no other way. You just got to straight shoot, you know, at what it is.
It was maddening to watch it and to see so many people start to understand and not
make the connection,
not get it. Like, how can you get it and not get it? And then I think that's indicative of so many movements where when you're watching them or you're part of them and you're like, how can you be so close to understanding what it means, what mutual aid is, what community is, what helping people when need is.
I think what's important for us to remember as we do this work or as we try to work towards a free people, a freedom movement, is that everybody has an entry point, you know? And I have had to work on myself in this. We might be frustrated by how long it'll take some people to get to the place where we are or where we want them to be. But we still have to do the work to get them there.
Yes.
Because all of us have an origin story to how we got to where we are. And we didn't wake up woke, you know? We were asleep at one point and we had to rest and we had to learn how to get to a place where we can value the day and make the most of what we could get out of the day because we slept, you know? So I think it's important I'm learning to have compassion for the ways that people aren't necessarily meeting the moment how I would like them to, but we have to show what it looks like, you know, what examples do they have to meet the moment in the best way we know how. Yeah, because the conditions we're living in is not... we didn't learn this. This isn't the society that is teaching us how to be.
It's not in textbooks.
No.
Yeah.
And I think the real question of this moment is like the power of love over the power of fear. You know, a poet that I love, Tangu, he said something about everything is either the practice of slavery or the practice of liberation. Mm. And to take it further, I would say everything's, you know, either the practice of love or the practice of fear. And I think that's where we have to move from is like, okay, if I'm frustrated at someone, am I moving from a place of love or fear? How do I engage them that shows love? Sometimes love is going to get in that ass, you know? Like, love says what you don't want to hear sometimes and says it how you don't want to hear it. And my grandma said a lot of things I didn't want to hear in the ways I didn't want to hear it, but I'm grateful she loved me enough to do that. So I think we got to learn to have a little bit more compassion with each other because the right, for all intents and purposes, they're not fighting over the same things the left is fighting over, and it's just not effective. We have to take stock of what's effective. And right now we haven't been effective, so I think there needs to be a different strategy.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
You know?
We have some Palestinian Knafeh for you.
Ooh!
I hope you're not allergic to anything.
No.
Okay, well-
Shrimp, but
Okay, well, there's
But I
none
don't
in
think-
that.
I don't think
there's
there's
no
any of this.
Knafeh. Shrimp and Knafeh.
oh, this is so sweet.
I thought you
I
might.
can't wait to get back to.
I
Man,
know, me too.
I really can't wait.
Honestly, one of the hardest things for me, because I was going very often for about 2 years, 2018, 2019, is just not being able to go back.
I want to say I can't have this conversation with you without also saying that some of the greatest poets I've ever met are Palestinian and from Palestine.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a big honor for me too, because thinking about the fact that Rifat al-Hurri is not here, you know, and there's so many poets who have been able to help use language to show us what language can do, you know, to show us what language can do to reinstate our humanity, our dignity, and our capacity for love. So I definitely want to big up Rifat. And Muhammad, I saw you have Muhammad's book here.
Yeah.
So
I know you wrote the foreword to
his first
book,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is amazing.
Yeah. I love Muhammad, and
Muhammad is amazing. And
I think that's the other part that makes it sensitive for me, is that I see people I love who have lost everything, you know, Sarah was telling me she knows Hassam, and my friend Hassam, he's lost like entire family members wiped out of his family.
Oh, yeah.
And so
hundreds. Friends of mine have lost hundreds of family members.
I'm just like,
yeah.
How do you not have compassion enough to know that this is wrong? You know,
Yes.
You don't need to see any more violence. You just I think we need to just affirm the people we love as much as we can. And affirm their dignity.
Couldn't agree more.
So thank you.
Thank you.
For this.
The only other thing I wanted to ask if you could do is, as you took one of the seeds out, if you could put a seed in.
Ooh.
So there's pieces of paper and the little ball, maybe the one that was empty that you got. And if you want to use the books over here to write
great.
on. And you can write.
Exactly what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. And will you let us know what you wrote and put your name on it so that when someone gets it, they know it came from you? It's honestly been so amazing to have you here. I wish I could have talked to you longer, but
no worries.
Now that we're acquainted, hopefully we can meet offline.
Yes, I would love that, especially since now we're in the same city, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So what does it say? Yours is going to be so good. I'm just going to blow everyone else's out of the water.
I don't know. It just came to me. I was like, I know exactly.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, here we go. I said, describe a world where the power of love is the law of the land.
Oh, I hope someone gets that one.
Yeah, me too.
Will you put it in the ball and just drop it in there?
What they're going to say.
Thank you so much for being on the seeds with me.
Thank you for having me.
you.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been beautiful, and I love it. I love a day when I can cry for good reason.
Oh, and I'm like, hopefully our rambling led to something good.
I'm sure it did, and if nothing else, I hope that it led people to get to know you better, and
thank you,
and to pay more attention to your work, and get Florida water.
Yes, I'm so grateful, and hopefully we'll be kicking it somewhere soon.
Yeah,
hopefully a free Palestine.
I would love to have some Knafeh with you in a free Palestine.
It's gonna happen.
Thank you, Asha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.